I'm Kevin Power, and this is SaskScapes, the podcast featuring stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. This episode of SaskScapes is sponsored by the Saskatchewan German Council. The Saskatchewan German Council is a provincial nonprofit umbrella organization to nearly 40 member groups, representing all people of German-speaking backgrounds. By engaging people of all ages to become active and involved partners in a vibrant multicultural community, the Saskatchewan German Council is committed to the preservation and promotion of the German language, traditions, and culture for all people of Saskatchewan. You'll find the link to their website in the show notes. Welcome to another episode in the series entitled German Culture Alive, sponsored by the Saskatchewan German Council. You'll hear more from the Saskatchewan German Council's Executive Director during this episode. I'd also like to express my thanks to the Office of the President at the University of Saskatchewan for your very kind support. So one of the great joys in recording people's stories for the last 10 years is that I always feel like a guest, once a stranger, feels like a friend by the end of our time together. With this episode's guest, it was clear we'd hit it off before we even met when we spoke by phone. Chancellor Grit McCreath is the current University of Saskatchewan Chancellor, a title she's held for the past 6 years and one that she will relinquish this spring. She succeeded the previous Chancellor, Roy Romano, a name familiar to many in the province and beyond our borders. Now, when reflecting back on her journey so far, Chancellor McCreath sees her role as, well, sort of sprinkling fairy dust wherever she goes, never missing a chance to make connections, turning those connections into friends, listening to stories, to share her own story, and never missing a chance to share what her German heritage has meant in her life. Chancellor McCreath is fiercely proud of her family history and fun fact, her parents offered the very first German-speaking lessons in Saskatoon. Now, joining us at the Chancellor's office is the Saskatchewan German Council's Executive Director, Gabrielle Vitali-Harrison. Okay, so I don't typically hit the record button until it's time to introduce the guest, but I've learned of late that it's when the guest doesn't know that I've started recording that I capture some great moments. Pretty sneaky, huh? So just one thing I do want to mention. When the three of us met, Gabrielle had a red bag from the German Christmas market held a while back, and the Chancellor was eyeing it with delight. Gabby was so generous to offer the bag as a gift, and on this bag are black scissor-cutting designs. That design was made by Saskatoon artist and puppeteer Waltraud Steven. Waltraud is a past guest from episode 102 of SaskScapes. So pretty cool how things connect, huh? And that's what I mean when I talk about Grit McCreath's life. It's all magically connected somehow. The magic only fairy dust can create, I guess. All right, enjoy this conversation. I certainly did, and I can speak on behalf of Gabrielle and say that she too did enjoy our time together.
Okay.
So the whole podcast series is arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Then when the German Council said we'd like to sponsor some,
Fun.
So I think this is like this may be ninth one that we've done for you. We've done everything from history to food to arts. Yeah, so
Cool.
Yeah.
And there would be quite a few Germans in this area, right? I mean, I can remember growing up, like Ernie Lindner was Austrian, but spoke, he was one of my parents' best friends, and there was a whole group of them that would, and Professor Alschul from anatomy, like there was a whole group of people that spoke German that would get get together, I think. But anyway.
Even now, I'm sorry,
No, it's fine.
we're society talking, there is, you're probably aware, quite a lot of professors here. Physics department has several toxicology.
Yeah, Volker Gett.
Holger and Hecker.
Yeah, he's done some amazing work.
And
yeah,
we just
interesting.
Got together with some of them last week at somebody's house for the Glühwein.
Oh, nice.
So, but I think it changed. I think Germans now don't stick so much.
Not so much anymore. I think it's so global and
It's global, and they come with well-equipped often with English skills.
Yes,
and whatnot.
and all my relatives in Germany now speak English. Like many of them have been to North American universities, and the only relatives I have are still in Germany. And it's funny because every time I have to introduce Volker, he said, "Grit, you're the only person that says my name properly." Volker Getz. Yeah. And my dad was Gerhard, so nobody could say that here. So he switched it up to George. And you're not taping this already.
Yeah,
oh, you're such a brat.
Yeah, and your name is short for Margaret.
Yes.
Which is very clever. Because I was wondering the origins of your name, and then because Margaret, the traditional spelling of Margaret, the short version of Margaret is Peggy, which still to this day makes my brain scramble, trying to get the logic of that.
Margaret, Marg, Meg, Peg, Peggy, I think is...
Is that what it is?
That's the evolution of that name, I think so. And Grit is not that unusual in Germany.
Really?
It just isn't. And I'm from the northern part of Germany, so close to Denmark, and my mom's always wanted to call me Grit, and then my husband came along and just... I've been Grit for over 50 years. Because in school, I think I did get Margaret, and then Margie, a little bit of Margie. But
well, this is a good segue. Well, why don't you tell me who you are?
Where do you start?
I know who you are. It's an honor finally to be making this podcast work with the current Chancellor of Saskatchewan. And it's lovely to finally meet you. We've spoken on the phone, and I knew instantly that you would have amazing stories to tell. And so now we get to hear some of those amazing stories. So where do I want to start? At the very beginning, as I usually say. Tell me about your parents, where they were born, and what they did for a living.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So my mom and dad came to Canada in 1949, and I was just a baby. They were both academics in Europe. So my father was born in a Mennonite settlement where under Catherine the Great they were allowed to keep their religion and their language. And he had a postgraduate degree at the University of Engels in Russia. And he taught at the university and was, because of his being an academic and his pacifist religious beliefs, was taken off by the Soviets to Siberia, and he came out only weighing 70 pounds. And it's a long story, and my brother and I are still trying to patch it all together because our parents have been gone for more than 50 years, and we don't have any documentation, just oral histories of this. But long story short, I guess, he eventually escaped. They put him into the espionage division of the Russian army because he could speak. He was a philologist, could speak many languages, and he was sent into what used to be West Germany with a fake German uniform, and he was supposed to report back on troop maneuvers in Germany. So he did it once, was taken back by helicopter into the Russian zone. The second time, he just escaped. And he was captured, of course, by the Germans, thrown into prison. And he's in his prison cell reciting German poetry. And my dad, I think it's part of a generation maybe, they could sing songs and recite poetry for days on end. I swear to God, we grew up all singing German songs. I could probably burst into song.
Please do, at any time. It's most welcome.
Mein Vater war ein Wandersmann. Anyway, so he was in...
How old would he have been at this time?
I would say 30-ish.
He had yet to meet your mom?
Had not met Mom, so he's in jail in Germany, and they hear him reciting poetry in his cell. So the officer reports back to his superior and says, you know, that man that we've just captured with the fake German uniform is actually not Russian at all, as we suspected. He's Mennonite. He speaks the same dialect we speak. And they tried him again and just let him go. But back in the day, you couldn't even walk across the street with ID. He had no ID whatsoever. So he wandered into the farm and just the estate of what would be a relative of my mum's now, so Uncle Willy and Tante Hilde. And he works there as a farmhand and then becomes the farm manager. And my mum has just finished. She taught sciences. My older brother's a professor, and we often wonder what her curriculum would have been, but she taught sciences at the college level. And we're just curious, what would they be teaching back in the day? We don't know. I guess if we did some research, we could probably find out. Anyway, she's in East Germany. Her husband has just died. He was a lawyer in Herzberg. And my mum has my brother, who's just a little baby. She pulls a wagon for 12 days from what used to be East Germany to West Germany, where the relatives are. And she's got her mother-in-law and her mother, who are ailing, older women, with my brother in a wagon. And they walk through the forests, sleep at night in the forest, and finally get to West Germany. I mean, when I see the pictures now in the Ukraine, I mean, it just tugs at my heart. I wasn't there, but you so relate to those stories. And our parents barely ever talked about any of these stories. Barely. It was just...
And she would be carrying no possessions with her.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. So she ends up at my Tante Katjen, and she's neighbors to Uncle Willy, where my dad is working. And she arrives there with her son, doesn't have a husband. Her husband has passed away. And so, long story short, they meet and get married. And I think when they decide to come to Canada, I'm maybe 10 months old or something, and they just agree to start fresh, come to Canada, leave everything behind. And I mean, I think my mom's family was pretty horrified because my dad's from Russia and, Mennonite, and my grandfather on my mom's side was the mayor of Goslar, which is where I was born. And so you can just imagine back in the day, that might have ruffled a few feathers, who knows, right? And then they announced that they're going to go to Canada. I mean, but anyway, so that's...
And they came to Canada, what year would that have been?
So 49.
49.
Yeah, May of 1949. And I was born in September, so I don't know. I've never done the math. I must have just been... Do it quickly, Gabby. So there you go. Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that sitting across the room here is Gabrielle Verlich Harrison, the executive director of the Saskatchewan German Council, a great sponsor of these series of German culture alive in Saskatchewan. Gabby is smiling. I will get you to yell a hello from across the room. Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Hello, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with both of you. And it's, although we had several podcasts in the making before, the first time I'm actually part of the recording.
Yeah, I said to Gabby, I welcome a co-pilot.
Well, I'm honored. That's fun. That's awesome.
So when they came to Canada, they would not have had a whole lot of belongings with them.
Oh, very, very little. And it's interesting. I have a little ceramic rabbit that has traveled with my mother through all these things, and it's a very treasured possession. And I have it in my home, and when I think about the journey that little rabbit would have taken from East Germany, then walking for days to get to West Germany, and then the ship across to Canada, and it's still with me, and it's very, very treasured. Everybody in my family knows that's an important, and that would have been one of the few things. And I have a half-brother who's 10 years older than I, and he would have traveled along on this journey. I didn't even mention him, but a 10-year-old brother, and then little me. And
is your half-brother still with us?
He's not. He was a professor at the University of New Brunswick, and actually he was a German history professor and did all his research and studies in the sort of war history and post-war history. That was his research. And he actually published the Encyclopedia of German History, which is a 2-volume quintessential research piece. And his last name is not the same as mine. His is Doerr. Doerr, so Jürgen Doerr. Jürgen Doerr.
So your education, education is baked into your DNA.
Oh, big time. Yeah. So my parents both being academics, and it's interesting because they did come to Canada knowing some English. I mean, it's just the same as most people here taking a second language, in most cases French. And then if you suddenly got plopped into France and had to function, I mean, my mother, and we used to tease my mom because she would read all the English signs as if they were German words, like stop would be stopp. And we used to have lots of fun with that as kids. So not quite as difficult as it could have been because they had some understanding of English.
So did they come straight to Saskatchewan?
They left Hamburg, and the ship, it was a refugee ship, a Cunard ship called the Scythia. And interesting because I was going to bring some show and tell, but we just don't need it. And they landed in Quebec City and then took the train and landed in Saskatoon. Yes. And then some Mennonites sponsored them, some relatives of my father's. And they had them go to Brooks, Alberta for a short while, but then they realized my parents needed to be in a city where there is a university. So the university, absolutely crucial and important in our lives from that point on.
And then they started eventually teaching here. How did that happen?
Oh my gosh, that was quite the journey, because all I remember of my parents is that they were constantly going to university classes because they were given credit for 1 year of university beyond grade 12 and had to start all over again. And so a lot of work, and it still happens to this day. I mean, they were both professors in Europe and come here, and you know what? I grew up in the most joyful house. I don't remember ever any whining or complaining. This is just how it is. And as a little girl, I grew up on this campus.
And you read poetry and sort of followed in your dad's footsteps that way.
I read poetry, and they would take a lot of evening classes. So my father worked on construction. I mean, I don't think ever lifted a hammer in his life. Anyway, he worked for a company called Keith Construction. And he ended up being, I think, a cabinet maker for many of the new homes in Saskatoon in the 50s. And my mom, interestingly enough, would have in our home. We just lived in a little house on 15th Street, a wartime house. Kids would come after school for German and French lessons, and she just would teach after school. And it's interesting because I, after school, would go to French lessons. In Europe, as you know, I mean, having another language or several languages is just not a big deal.
Right.
It's just very, very, very common. Anyway, so I'm losing my thread here a little bit. So my mom's catch me up here. Where
So
am I
your
going?
parent, how did the evolution of your parents coming to teach on campus?
Oh, yeah. So they're always taking classes, and they drag me along.
Yeah.
You know, my brother is 10 years older. He can stay home by himself, and by then he's 12 or 13. And they just bring me on the campus, and I have my book with me. I'm supposed to sit outside the classroom door till their class finishes and then walk home with them, because we lived really close by. Well, the minute the professor would shut the door, I was just gone. Like I was a little campus mouse. I knew my way around this campus like you cannot believe. And I'm this little person with braids. And I mean, I think I used to look pretty German back in the day. And I'd be on this campus just exploring and walking around and chit-chatting with people. And people would say, like, are you lost? Or, no, I'm just fine. You can just imagine this little person, right, wandering around.
You're sort of the bon vivant of the university campus.
And I remember when the bookshop used to be in the bottom of the admin building, and I just thought the bowl was spectacular, just that big space. And then I was always very careful to be back sitting on my chair when the class ended.
So your parents never knew you had escaped?
I don't think until many years later.
Right.
I told them, I don't think I was ever caught. And then it's interesting because there were several of us, and I can still remember all of my fellow students. It was Mary Kirkpatrick, and her dad was the Dean of Engineering, and Eva Newman, her mom was the librarian on the campus, and Mita Campbell. A number of us took private French lessons from Madame Legal on Broadway, and we would be invited to Mrs. Spinks's home. She would have teas on the campus for the wives of deans, and we would be invited to either sing a song in German or recite a poem in French or do a little... So I grew up, being the entertainment at the president's residence, which is pretty funny when you think about it, isn't it?
It's pretty funny considering the position you hold right now. It's
There
full
I
circle.
was.
Do you stand on a chair and entertain the folks here now?
Can you imagine? Well, I don't stand on a chair anymore, but yes, I can create quite a bit of havoc. Just you see, I've got pom-poms there, and I've got various university hats and so forth. So I do love this. Oh, well, you've got to admit, I have the best job on the campus, right?
You do.
Yeah.
But before we go there, at what point did you decide, or did you just always know that education was going to be your path?
Oh, that's a cute question. I think in grade 2, my parents tell me this. I asked my mom and dad to come into the living room because I had an announcement. I sat them down and I announced that I was going to be a teacher. And that's it. That was my announcement. I'm going to be a teacher. And so literally from grade 2 on, I was just on a very straight path. And in grade 1, I was at Brunskill School, so nearby.
Yeah.
I was the superintendent of schools at the time was Dr. Fred Gathercole, and he was coming to visit Brunskill, and the principal asked me if I could please present a bouquet of daisies to Dr. Gathercole. I mean, I just still think that must have been just so funny. So I have this little pinafore outfit that's kind of a German-looking outfit with my little braids, and I give Dr. Gathercole a bouquet of daisies, and from that day on, he followed my career. And I announced to him as well that I'm going to be a teacher, and so there he was in my first year of teaching. I taught at Grosvenor Park School. He was there on my first day, and isn't it interesting, like all the connections? And seriously, I was meant to be here because everything aligned. When you think of all the connections, it was crazy, right? Just crazy.
Did you know you were going to be a teacher because you just knew it instinctually, or was it that you wanted to follow in your parents' footsteps, or was it a combination of both? I mean, for example, I wanted to be a teacher because I liked chalk, which is not an admirable reason for wanting to be a teacher.
Oh,
I expect yours was a bit more deep than that.
Well, interesting, because I just loved that my mom would have these various neighborhood kids come to our house after school and have a lesson in German or a lesson. And I remember she used to just teach simple things like some basic conversation and colors and animals and food, but just all the neighborhood kids. And they would have been little kids, 5-year-olds and I mean, I don't think there were no teenagers. There was just little kids in the neighborhood. So I thought that was really, really cool. And then, yeah, both of them teaching and then being on the campus. Yeah, I think it was just a no-brainer, right? I had no choice. I was going to be a teacher no matter what.
Right. So when you began teaching, what did that look like? What did you teach? Where did you teach?
I taught at Grosvenor Park School, and I had a split grade 4-5 class with 36 kids in it. And I just taught the whole curriculum in grade 4 and 5. But when I think about it now, there were 36 kids in there, all different levels, and it's amazing. I keep in touch with quite a few of those students still, and that's now, so my first year of teaching was 1969. So how many years is that? Gabby, quick, you're good at the math. 50, yeah. Yes, so 55 years I've known. And yeah, I mean, I could have a party in Saskatoon just inviting former students from that year. Isn't it amazing?
That's
and
wonderful.
I just loved those kids to pieces. And they were my students. Like, yeah, big deal.
During the time you were growing up here, before you were a teacher, and then even when you were a teacher, how did your family and you keep German culture alive? Living here in Saskatchewan, how was it celebrated?
Do you know what? Always very, very proud. Absolutely. And I think Saskatoon at the time, I'm trying to think what year I would have started grade 1, maybe 1953 or something like that, 53, 54. And there were kids from many places coming, but I think I was the only German one, and I loved that I was different. I've always liked that. And we were not allowed to speak German outside the home because my parents would tell us that was really rude if people don't know what you're saying. So it's amazing because I still speak German almost as well as I do English, and I think it's because I learned both of them at the same time. Spoke German at home and then played outside and learned English, and we celebrated, and my mom would be very proud of having people over to have the painted Easter eggs and make a little Easter egg tree, or we had lots of Christmas things we did with Santas and special baking and Adventskalender with the 4 candles for the 4 Sundays before Christmas. And I remember my mom was very, very inclusive and was very happy to share the culture. She even used to come to my classroom at Brunskill to tell the kids I think we used to have, what were they called? Not Heritage Day, but something, Multicultural Day or something. And she'd come in and bring baking and...
Oh, so she'd get to be your entertainment now.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Right.
And I don't think we had any German neighbors, but my parents did know quite a few German people, especially from the university. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can think of many names, like Ernie Linder's one of them, going to his home with my parents, and he'd let me be in his little studio upstairs where he painted, and my mom and dad would be downstairs drinking German Riesling and speaking in German, and yeah, so I never lost. My parents never lost the thread, and I don't think they got to go back to Germany. I mean, we just had no money. Everybody worked hard. I'm trying to think. It wasn't till later in the 60s that they went back to Germany for the very first time for a holiday, and then once I went back with my mom for Christmas, which was just spectacular to actually be there. And they always stayed in touch with the relatives, long letters. I was just going through a box last night, and I still have copies of lots of scripty kind of Gothic writing, right? What's that called in German?
Cursive? Well, no,
yeah, well, for sure cursive, but it's not easy to read anymore, and it's like that printing that you find in old books, too.
We still come across it sometimes, too, when we do translations, too. But, yeah, that's very challenging to read.
Yeah, and I can still amazingly read it. Like, what's that all about? What's that good for? Anyway.
It's good subject material for the book, which will inevitably come out.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll print it in, I think, was it called Gothic? I'm not sure. Anyway, so I'll just go back to your question. I think always, I liked it that I was different. And I liked it that my mom was different. And she would have the same dress for years and years, and just that European flair of throwing on a scarf or reworking the sleeve or something. I mean, I never thought that we were poor, and I think we were probably very poor. And I know at Christmas, and both my parents really, really contributed to the community where we grew up. Like, I remember my dad built the rink at Brunskill School, so there was ice skating in the winter. He made the little winter skating shack where you could switch up your skates, and and just all the things that they did for the community. Well, and I have a cute story. I worked at the public library, and I remember when I was 13, I phoned Mrs. Groper, who was the chairman of the library board, and said, I'm 13 years old, and I can speak German and a little bit of French, and I think that I would really like a job at the library, but I'm too young. Could I make a presentation to the board meeting? Apparently, I said to her, and I ended up getting a job doing story hour at the library, and I think I got 85 cents an hour, and I would read little, Beatrix Potter, Peter Rabbit, and I would always take a book in German because the kids would think it was quite unique that somebody could read in a different language. And so I worked at the library all through high school, actually, but started at 13. What a cheeky monkey, eh?
No kidding.
Yeah.
But wonderful.
But crazy.
Yeah, but I mean,
oh my goodness,
there's enough introverts in the world. You're welcome to be anything other than an introvert.
Hallo, hier ist Gabriele Weidelich-Harrison, die Geschäftsführerin des Saskatchewan German Council, SGC. Ich hoffe, euch gefällt diese Podcast-Folge. Das SGC ist eine gemeinnützige Dachorganisation mit über 30 Mitgliedsgruppen, die unsere deutsche Kultur in Saskatchewan feiert und lebendig erhält. Wir setzen uns für die Bewahrung und Förderung der deutschen Kultur, Sprache und Bräuche für alle interessierten Menschen in Saskatchewan ein, indem wir durch kulturelle Angebote Menschen jeden Alters dazu bewegen, aktive und engagierte Partner in einer lebendigen, multikulturellen Gemeinschaft unserer Provinz zu werden. Wir sind stolz darauf, im Rahmen des SaskScapes Podcasts eine Reihe von Episoden mit dem Titel German Culture Alive zu sponsern. Und nun zurück zum Podcast. Viel Spaß!
What was the state of education like when you started teaching?
Well, Dr. Gathercole, which would never happen anymore, I think he was the superintendent for a couple of decades. Just so proud to be a teacher. Boy, I'm just trying to think. I feel like it was kind of halcyon days back then. The principal at Brunskill was Harvey Welsh, and I think he's still in Saskatoon, and I was always very pleased to be part of the system. Curriculum was not as prescriptive as it is now, I don't think. Looser, left more to the imagination. Didn't think anything of coaching after school or having clubs. It's very different now. It's all negotiated, and I remember pretty recently interviewing teachers, and they just, teach, and not all of them necessarily. It was just expected that we would do clubs, coach the volleyball team, and so forth.
And you could be held back as a child while you were teaching. Yeah, the word fail did exist then.
It did exist.
Doesn't seem to now.
Yeah, no, it was, and there we had A's, B's, and C's, and D's, and F's. Yeah, for sure we did. And I wish you could meet. I should have brought it. I wanted to bring you the picture of my class in 1969, but just the cutest group of kids you've ever seen. And I think they thought I was their big sister because I wasn't that much older than they. I think I was 20 when I started teaching, and because the class actually had my 21st birthday party for me.
And when did you retire from teaching?
I retired almost 20 years ago, and that's how long. I think I was 52 maybe. And that's how long I've been affiliated with the university, just on the Senate, the Board of Governors, and then I'm on my second round on the Board of Governors. Right. And
when you finished teaching, was the state of education in the province, I don't want to say worse, but was it more challenging? Was it headed in a direction that you might not have
I don't know if I can say that it was headed in a difficult direction. I have taught in 3 provinces, so Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Alberta, and I've taught every grade from 1 to 12, just in various situations and in various places. And every time my husband moved, I moved. And teachers are very transferable, and the fact that I could teach French was a good thing. And I, you know what? I've always loved being a teacher so much that I don't know if I get caught up in all the politics and the, maybe I'm a bit of a, Pollyanna person in that.
That may not be a bad thing.
I've always enjoyed it. I think more challenging in that I think we were paying more attention to special needs, whereas before, like that class of 36 kids I had, I didn't get any files on identified learning issues or anything. It was just very different. And now you have to do these IPPs and do a lot of paperwork on, special needs, special learning styles. More complicated for sure. Absolutely for sure. And then the issue in my last school was Crescent Heights High School, where I was the administrator, is I think we identified 40 different cultures. And so language becomes an issue, and a lot of kids that come to Canada as refugees, just as I had done, but they get, put in with the age-appropriate class and don't speak the language, and there isn't support. That's a big issue.
Right.
There's no support for the second language, and there just isn't the funding that it would take to get everybody up to speed now.
Yes, Gabrielle's raising her hand as if a student.
Like a good student in school, because I have, if you don't mind, a follow-up question.
Yeah.
On that, as we talk about education, and you earlier mentioned that it's not a big deal in Germany to know more than one language. So, how do you think the Canadian education system would benefit from focusing on more language education? I know we can take German in high school, there is usually the French and whatnot, but we find it's not as popular, and people are not as interested to go abroad, go on youth exchanges, and probably for a variety of reasons. But do you think the system would benefit, or do you just think with the experience of a lot of immigrant kids being here and not getting the help they need, that it would just be too much?
Well, it's interesting because going to Europe now, and my husband and I travel extensively. I think we've always traveled for the 50 years of our marriage, and I think we've been to 100 countries, and everyone speaks English now. So there's not a huge benefit. And I think of all my relatives in Germany, when I go to visit, which is, every couple of years maybe, they all want to speak English because they want to, practice their English. And I would like to speak German, and we end up speaking something my mom called halb und halb gehacktes. So half German, half English, and it's all, it's not one or the other. But I think that's a very main reason now that, you don't need to take German to go to Germany. It's certainly a benefit. And
a different experience.
And a very different experience.
Read signs.
But the Germans all, so many of them take English, right? Do you know if it's a prerequisite or it's...
Yeah, usually when I went to school, English started in grade 5, but now I think they start in grade 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and plus often other languages, often French and maybe another language on top. It's a good point for sure.
Does that sort of begin to whitewash something that you didn't have, which was embracing and loving being different? Does this start to assimilate everybody almost too much?
Interesting. Well, it's interesting. And I haven't mentioned yet that both my parents, once they finished all their classes at the U of S and graduating, and they both did master's degrees at Middlebury College in Vermont, which is I think it's still the number one language school in America. They both taught German and at the high school level here in Saskatoon. So I think my mom taught mostly at Walter Murray, I think, and my dad's taught Russian and German at Evan Hardy, I think, and Bedford, and so they talked or spoke German. And interestingly enough, they had such a different relationship with their students than most kids do. I mean, I'm sure my mom started teaching when she was the age that I was retiring from teaching. So she started teaching in Canada at 50. And I used to worry that maybe discipline would be an issue with, big classes and so forth. But, I mean, at Christmas, she'd come home and have, like, a Hummel figurine from her grade 12 students. And I'm going, Mom, kids don't give their grade 12 teacher a present. Like, that's not what they're doing. And I think she ended up being like this little German lady that the kids loved. And I think she was like the school, the campus grandma or something. I mean, just a sweet, and she never ever had any discipline problems. And I was just astounded at that. Because some of the kids, and she had big German classes. The big deal at our house was she'd give a test, and I was able to mark the short answer questions to help her out at home. I was the teacher's assistant or something, but and she was the same. She just loved teaching. And imagine starting teaching in a different country at 50. I mean, but then they both passed away at 60. So she had 10.
Your parents both passed away at 60?
Within days of each other. Just days of each other.
My
it is
goodness.
a sad story. And if
so
I
young.
ever want to whine about having a tough day, I just go, suck it up, Grit. I mean, my mom had cancer, and her principal at Walter Murray said to her one day that she didn't look well. Maybe you should, have a checkup. So my mom went, and she had liver cancer, and my dad died days later of the cardiologist said was a broken heart. But they were the cutest little couple, walked everywhere holding hands, and these little German people. And to the end of their days, they were so proud of their heritage and would speak to anybody about it. I mean, my mom, you probably can pick up my personality is similar to my mother's. But she would just start a conversation with someone in a shop and end up talking about Germany or German culture or,
They must have been fiercely proud of you.
Oh, well, and they would just be shocked. I mean, they've been out of my life for over 50 years. I was just 25, I think, when they passed away.
You mean they'd be shocked at the path you went?
Oh, well, they'd be. I mean, I think they'd be surprised. I have kind of a simplistic view. I mean, I'm sure they're sitting in their rocking chairs up there, watching. But
why do I think they would say, "Yeah, we knew it all along. That's pretty much par for the course."
Isn't that funny, though?
Now, you didn't stay in Saskatoon. You're married. Your husband is not an educator?
No. Right. He's in the he's an economist in the financial services business, in the investment business. And he's just retired after 55 years. Can you believe it? So, but he's so sweet. He would take German lessons we moved to Toronto because that's where he had a job, and he would go to German lessons at the high school, so that if and when we were would visit Germany, he could say some German, and he was always proud of himself that he could say Fußball-Sportplatz,
which means,
well, it's just a football,
soccer football,
field. But it was a long word, and he'd never seen all these multisyllabic words before. He was very proud of Fußball-Sportplatz. But he took lessons, and then it's interesting. I always tell people that English is just one sound shift beyond German. I mean, it's much easier for me to teach someone German than for me to teach someone French. Do you agree with that? Yeah. And you can look at a page of German writing and pick out. I mean, there are many words that you can figure out the root or. Yeah.
So then from Toronto, you went to Calgary.
To Alberta, Edmonton, then Calgary. Yeah.
What's life like for you in Calgary as far as you finding outlets to celebrate your culture there?
Oh, just continue on. A lot of it obviously is rooted in what I did growing up as a child, and it's easy to continue those, and so many of those celebrations have just been embraced by North Americans. I mean, everyone does Christmas trees now, and I just noticed your Christmas market bag. I mean, it's a lot of it has just been adopted since I was a little girl. It wasn't always the case. I think that's just evolved over, the decades, that a lot of the German store and a lot of the songs and hymns and have German roots.
Did you do anything around St. Nicolaus Day?
I don't anymore, but I used to put my shoes
Did
out
you?
December. Yes,
Right.
yeah, and I did it with our boys. But you know what? I have to admit, I haven't continued it with grandkids. I have not.
Who are the educators in your family?
Now, who's continued teaching?
Yeah.
Just me, and the boys have both taken the route to follow their father in math and economics, and that's
I was just wondering
more
if
their path. But
if
they
it
both took
rubbed
German
off.
at school,
Yeah.
at high school. They both did. They've been to visit. They've met the relatives, and yeah.
You were last there when?
Just very recently, I was telling Gabby that I went with President Stoichev from the university and Vice President Baljeet Singh. And we were in Germany. We visited the Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt. Then we were in Berlin and visited the consulate there, and the Saskatchewan has an office there. And the most fun I ever had, we've got a gentleman here on the campus. His name is Dr. Volker Gertz. And oh my gosh, you might remember his proper title. He's the head of Veto. Is he this? Oh, if he's listening to this, I'll get into trouble. Anyway, the disease and infectious diseases.
Yeah, he became quite popular during the pandemic,
very
as far as
much so.
Yeah.
So I said to him, Volker, I have to go to Frankfurt and meet some people from the university there. And the University of Saskatchewan is partnering with a number of universities overseas now. And I said, I can talk to you all day long about everyday German, what are you eating for dinner and what are you doing tomorrow kind of thing, but I don't know the scientific language. Could you just write me a little bit of a speech or just a paragraph? And so I surprised everyone in Frankfurt. We were at a dinner, and I had a little time on the agenda, and I got up and spoke. I had memorized what Volker had given me, and I just did this total speech in German, and they're all looking at me, and my name is Grit McCreath, and what? So I did a speech and, just thanked them for having us come to Germany, and then carried on a little bit about what the research was, and had so much fun with that. They were very surprised that someone from the Canadian delegation could still speak some German, or could speak German at all.
They must have been impressed.
That was fun. It was really fun to do that, yeah.
If I handed you a German menu from a restaurant, what would you order?
Oh, my goodness. I'd have to think about
Favorite foods growing up?
goulash, and I have to think schnitzel for sure.
Did you have rouladen?
Rouladen, yes, yeah. And both my parents were cooks. My dad cooked just as often as my mom. They didn't. It was not my mom's job to make dinner. They always cooked together. But rouladen, Spätzle, Kuchen. And to this day, I'm sort of cooked for my family for 30 years, and I'm kind of done with it. But baking, that's another. Torte, Schwarzwälder Kirschtorte and Biskuittorte, and so lots and lots of German food that we grew up with. Oh my goodness, yes. And we have a favorite schnitzel restaurant in Calgary. If anyone's coming to Calgary, phone me. I'll set you up. And love German food.
So how did you become Chancellor McCreath, the Chancellor of the University of Saskatchewan?
I think it was a bit of an evolution, so you can tell there's deep roots there on the campus, right? And then I think I came on the Senate in, I think it was 2005 or 2006. was on the Senate for 3 years, and then I became the Senate rep on the Board of Governors. And then when I finished that, they made me honorary ambassador just because I'm so passionate about this university, and I really, really feel, I don't know if owing a debt of gratitude is exactly the right thing I want to say, but I just feel so grateful that the university welcomed my parents, had them start from almost scratch, being students here. I think it's in my desk, I have a Christmas card my parents made for the relatives in Germany, and we have a Volkswagen Beetle. 6 of us drove around in a Volkswagen Beetle, and our picture was taken in front of the brand new arts building. And we sent that to all. I think it's in my desk. I'll find it and show it to you later. But just deep, deep roots here. Lived nearby, and in the evening after supper, my mom and dad would say, let's go for a walk, and we'd walk down here and go and walk on the campus. It's a gorgeous place to have a walk. And I just was always so grateful to this place. My parents loved it. And I think I have to say it was probably never dreamt. I mean, in all my wildest dreams, I never thought that this is something I would do. But I think it was Roy Romano that brought it up to me, and he said, I think you should consider this.
He had been the chancellor at the time.
Yeah, I'm number 16, he was number 15, and he just said to me, and he was just such a delightful man. I mean, he's one of my favorite people. I think I've known him for 40 years, just not well, but just always known who he was, and always very happy to speak with him and proud to speak with him. He's such an elegant statesman. And so he said, I want you to think about this. And I said, oh my gosh, Roy, I said, let's go look at the pictures of the chancellors in the boardroom. And we decided out of the 16, there are probably 13 white male lawyers in their 60s. And I said, I don't know. I don't think a school teacher is going to cut it in this setting. And he says, well, just think about it. So it was he that totally encouraged me, and yeah.
So but you're nominated, yes?
Nominated. So I think I know. I mean, a number of people signed the nomination form, and of course, I mean, I've been around a long time. I think I'm the institutional history around here now. That's a long time.
What's the official duties of a chancellor?
So I think my favorite job, and I think the most important job, is presiding over convocation. And by the time I'm done, which is going to be June 30th this year, I will have granted over 30,000 degrees. Wow. Isn't that a phenomenal number? Yeah, very cool. So that, and so between President Stoichev and myself, we're the only 2 people that shake hands, and we know across this country that we have a unique convocation where it's more personal. I know in Calgary they have 3 people at a time stand before the chancellor, and they just nod. Peter and I both shake hands, and I think I say probably 95% of the names to the person as I'm shaking their hand. And then Peter is so good. He'll say, a couple more words to encourage them or congratulate them. Next thing is you're the ex officio on the Board of Governors at the university. And the board is small. There are just 12 or 11 people on the board. So back on the board again, I did a stint back in the early 2000s and now again. And I've had the privilege of working with just exceptional board chairs. I mean, this university is so lucky. Between Shelley Brown and now we have Keith Martell chairing the board. It's a wonderful, wonderful Board of Governors, unbelievable chemistry. And the decisions they make on $1 billion budget are so thoughtful. Everyone is so passionate. I'm very proud to be part of that group. And then I chair the Senate. There are about 120 people on the Senate, and they represent all the various geographic areas of the province as well as all professions. So there'd be a representative there from the engineers and the physicians and surgeons. So it's a very, very interesting group with a huge reach, and they are all ambassadors for this university throughout the province. So those are my three main jobs, so Senate, Board, and Convocation.
Do you have the opportunity to do any public speaking at all in that capacity?
I do. I get invited to, the YW Women's Breakfast and the Rotary Club and, various things. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud to represent the university. And the other person that just does and inspires me constantly is our president, Peter Stoichev. He is such a good speaker without notes. I always have to have my notes there to cling to. But, I think he does much more than I do, but I think it's important. I think it's important to be an ambassador, spread the word. And these days, I think universities don't always get a little bit of a tough rep. People are concerned about the cost and viability and what's going on there anyway, kind of thing. So I think we're so lucky. This university is in a sweet spot. I mean, between all the amazing research funding we get, and we have our president to thank for that. He chairs the U15, which is the top 15 universities in the country. He chairs that. And no one's ever chaired that outside of Ontario or British Columbia. I mean, I'm pretty proud of it. And our student population has grown every year. Other universities are struggling with and we've got a government that supports us. And
it's not unique to this university, but there is a huge challenge that foreign students are dealing with right now, which is a shame because that's more variety of culture coming to our province that perhaps may not be able to.
Yeah. I mean, interesting, Anna, who works in the governance office that you met today, Anna Okapiec, she came from Poland at 18 years of age and has done a PhD here and is now an important person in the governance office. Like, I said to her today, where would we be without students like that? I mean, and here she is contributing hugely back to the university, coming from Poland, and she visits her home country regularly. And the president of her student council is from India, or our university students union is students from all over. I want to say 130 countries are represented on this campus.
Your story is so inspiring. Do you have the opportunity at all to speak to young students now in any capacity to champion them as they move forward in life? You had it baked into your DNA, but I think sometimes we fear for students moving forward in their life, that where perhaps the same level of passion and thirst and hunger is not the same as what it was for you.
I want to say that every opportunity I get, I grab it, and you can tell. I mean, I've ended up being this extrovert person, so I can't help it. So any opportunity I get, I'm very, very happy to encourage students and tell them a bit of a story, or just listen to their stories. How important is that? With all the, I just met a young man at lunch today. I was eating lunch with Anna, and he's not from Canada, and here he is asking me if I could be supportive as he runs the debate society, and I'm going, that's so impressive. So very much on a one-on-one basis, which is kind of the domino effect, right? You talk to one person, they'll maybe speak to some more. I don't teach anymore, other than every once in a while I'll give a talk at I do a panel for the College of Education, which is my college, or so nothing officially, but lots and lots, just incidentally.
When you are doing speaking, for example, with the what was it that you said?
At the YW. Yeah.
Do you get a chance to talk about your German culture?
I have, absolutely. Yes, I don't miss an opportunity. Yeah, very, very proud, and it's got to be inspiring, right? When I think of my mom, the courage that it would have taken to, leave a teaching position and, try and escape into the West and, just on our own. And then even like leaving you've left, our parents and we left our countries of birth and just start from scratch. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, and it's important. I think it's really important to share those stories so people understand. And then when you're watching the news, it continues at a massive. There have never been more people in the world that are, don't have roots anywhere, just moving to safe places or, leaving war-torn situations. There's so much. So I think it's almost obligatory that you share the stories and be supportive and encouraging.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I'm going to steal a bit of Gabby's thunder here because among some of the notes that she passed on to me, it's a rather profound question. So I leave it to you as far as how deep you want to go into this. But this is a quote from an interview that you did quite a while ago, in which you said, "I'm not worried about the world at all." At that time, you said that.
What year was that?
I think that was that was in one of the Star Phoenix's interviews that you did. So I'm thinking maybe around 2019, 18, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you weren't worried about the state of affairs, and then now.
That is a tough question, and isn't it funny because Anna and I were just talking about something similar at lunchtime, and whenever, I might answer it in a different way. Whenever I have people still saying to me, "Oh my gosh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket," what about the kids these days? Anna and I said at noon today, just this conversation we had with this young man, like, I say to people, just come to the campus with me and follow me around. I'll just walk into the circle, or I'll sit down with a group of students having lunch. Like I don't really have a shy bone in my body. And I love that I just have the privilege, absolute privilege, of being able to talk to young people on this campus. And it doesn't take long before you realize absolutely remarkable people the students are, and the world they're going to be able to carry on for sure and do, maybe hopefully make it better than it is right this very minute, because it's pretty complex out there, and there are, I just read some stats and I do not remember the numbers, but about the number of homeless people in the world right now, people on the move. But in terms of what's happening on this campus, the students that are in every single college and what they know about the science and IT and AI and education, it's absolutely incredible. Like, they, in many ways, can run circles around some of us. And I really feel a lot of hope going forward. And I think we are incredibly, incredibly privileged to be experiencing this in this place at this time in Saskatchewan. I think it's a little bit of a bubble in some ways, and yet our reach is massive. I mean, here we have a president that now shares his expertise with all the senior people in universities across the country. I think the potential here with Dr. Gatz's expertise on, vaccines and immunizations and infectious diseases around the world. I mean, this university is what the world needs, and we try and figure out what it is the world needs and share our expertise. So for that, I know that sounds very optimistic, but as you say that, it occurs to me that maybe the solution for not going completely insane, which is me every time I turn the news on. Oh, phone me. Maybe the solution is to focus the lens more locally, more in your backyard, in the state of affairs there, rather than take on the entire world and move through life just thinking all we have is this world. Focus things in. So what I have right now is what's in my backyard. And share, just to be so magnanimous. I mean, I'm looking at the various projects that are happening in Germany, and our president is heading to Germany again very shortly. I mean, just the partnerships, sharing research, information around the world. I mean, we have a lot to offer here. You know, we've got the agriculture, which is, you know, one of the best literally around the world. And so sharing what we know, I think is very important. Celebrating what we have, big time. And I mean, I'm often accused of having pink glasses, and I think I might have some pink glasses, but just that optimistic view of, you know, just one step at a time, moving forward, and and for sure celebrating what we have and sharing. I think that's pretty simplistic, but
it's an admirable path or direction to head in. I can't honestly say I'm there, but I do hear what you're saying. Chancellor McCreath, what a pleasure to finally meet you. When Gabby brought this whole topic in your name forward, I thought, I don't even know what a chancellor is. I guess there's a story there. And lo and behold, there's not only a story there, there's a magnificent person behind the story. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story with us all. You're delightful. You're wonderful. Well, and you're optimistic.
And I'm excited to have spent this time with you and Gabby. What a treat. Very excited, very honored and humbled that you would think this is a good story, but what a great opportunity it's been for me to share some of this and talk about some things that I just haven't thought about in years and years, and share them with you. You were a real treat to meet, especially after your voice on the phone. And now, hoo-hoo! You guys are great. Absolutely.
You hear that,
great.
Mom? Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for listening. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. SaskScapes can be downloaded from iTunes, Google Play, the SaskScapes app for Android devices, and all of the other major podcasting apps. Stop by and say hi to us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter @SaskScapes. So tell me, what fuels the culture in your community? Who has a story that must be heard? Consider bringing SaskScapes to your part of the province. Email us at saskapes@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. Please share your thoughts on this episode or any of the episodes by writing a review in the iTunes Store or Google Play. Your star ratings help our audience grow. Remember, our stories are our legacy. Now, somewhere around the world for years to come, stories like those found in SaskScapes are being heard. Think about it. We're creating an oral archive so that who we are in this province is never forgotten. I'm Kevin Power. Join me again next time.